of July. It's even hard to say that.
I know, right?
First day of July.
July 1st.
And Justin Harkin says the weather forecast today is going to be nice, so keep that in mind. That's your name, isn't it? Okay,
Yep.
Just double check it. Birthday boy over here. We're being joined at the desk by our party scoopers. Yes, indeed, folks. We have Kevin Hall and Jeff Lank representing each side of the docket. So what are we chatting about this morning, gentlemen?
Well, today, obviously we had the big news yesterday with the Hobby Lobby decision, which is going to be interesting, I think, in all these federal races. We can argue the merits of the specific healthcare law implications, but I think for a lot of these Republican candidates, the last thing they want to do is to start the general election by talking about abortion. And particularly in the Senate race. You have Joni Ernst, who has been a sponsor of a bill in the Iowa legislature described as a personhood amendment, which says you outlaw all abortions, even in cases of rape and incest and life of the mother, and it outlaws a number of these other methods to prevent pregnancies as well. And so I just think that's sort of a conversation that's out of step with the mainstream of Iowans. People don't want to quite go that far on this issue of abortion, and we can talk about the specifics of Hobby Lobby, but that's probably not an issue that any Republican really wants to start talking about in July.
Well, what a personhood amendment does is personhood recognizes that the baby in the womb is a person, a living being, and is entitled to the same rights as any other living human being. So that's what a personhood bill does. It doesn't meter out punishment for anybody. It just recognizes that child in the womb is entitled to the same rights as we all are. The Hobby Lobby case is really interesting because really what it boils down to is religious freedom.
Right.
And it's odd that this is such a partisan political issue. It's right versus left, Republican versus Democrat, when religious freedom is enshrined in our Constitution, in the First Amendment. We are all entitled to freedom of religion, and that's what this boiled down to. Hobby Lobby is saying the government should not force me to pay for insurance for abortifacients. And I think a lot of people are unclear on this. They're saying, well, Hobby Lobby's refusing to pay for women's birth control. Not true. They still cover 16 different types of contraception in their insurance plan for their employees. There are 4 types of contraception that they're saying this goes against my religious beliefs that I have to cover, and those are abortifacients. Those are pills like the morning after pill that you take after the act. So it's very odd that religious freedom, which we should all be for as Americans, that it's dividing the two parties like this, and I think it's really sad to see.
Well, I think the legal issue is slightly different, though, Kevin, and it's not just religious freedom because this is really about we're granting a new status to a corporation that there's never been before, and famously in 2012, Mitt Romney said that corporations are people too. Well, that's essentially what the Supreme Court said yesterday: is that the corporation can have a point of view on religion. The corporation can have a point of view on what they believe or don't believe, and that view supersedes the views of the people that work for the company. So I mean that's what I took out of this whole Hobby Lobby case. Is it says for the first time a corporation can have religious views. It is a person. So it's really just taking what Mitt Romney said in 2012. Remember that corporations are people too, and it put some real teeth into it.
Not true. What the ruling said is closely held for-profit companies. Now, what they mean by closely held is that the majority of the ownership is narrowed down to 5 people or less. So we're not talking about massive corporations that millions or thousands of stockholders hold interest to. It's closely held corporations. If they have a religious belief that they don't want to be complicit in destroying a human embryo, they should not have to be. That is what the Supreme Court ruled yesterday.
Well, but a closely held corporation, I don't think Hobby Lobby is considered a mom and pop operation.
Well,
by
but the majority of it is held by
the
majority of it is owned by just a handful of people, and that's what the Supreme Court ruled.
So now, are they all family members too?
It's a family that I believe owns the majority
Yeah,
share.
a couple.
Yeah, so if a family owns it, but so how many Hobby Lobby stores are there? Hundreds? How many employees do they have? tens of thousands. Like, this is not a small thing. This is not like saying if you run a butcher store, you can decide what happens in your butcher shop. This is a big corporation. Now, whether it's owned by a small handful of family members or whether it's owned by stockholders, that is a distinction that the court made. But don't dismiss this and say that the court didn't define corporations as having political beliefs. Like, that's what they said.
But it did
closely held corporations, of course.
Right.
But to say that Hobby Lobby's not a big operation
Well,
is...
of course it is.
Okay.
Of course it is. I'm not arguing that.
And it was also made by 5 male judges, let's just say that. All right, so let's move on to another topic. I know. Let's move on to another topic.
I'm being good and being
I know,
quiet,
you're being
by the way.
quiet.
You're
I
gonna keep me from
appreciate
being
that.
quiet.
Okay, so moving on to another topic that I think we're going to see in the news, national news here very recently, is the problem with immigration. And President Barack Obama basically saying, no matter if Congress doesn't act, he's going to use his authority to make sure something happens. What do we see happening here in the next couple days?
And are you
with
talking
these statements being made?
specifically about the children
Yes.
coming across
Yes.
the border?
Yes.
Well, this is actually an interesting situation that we have because I think this year there's been 52,000 children, mostly from Central and South America, that have made their way across the border, and they're exploiting a law that many people think was brought in under Barack Obama, that means that those kids can't get sent back, right? They have to be they have to be handed off to some sort of family member that's already within the country. It's sort of a humanitarian bill. But in fact, this was all signed in 2008. It was passed, I think, unanimously, and George W. Bush signed it into law. So that's the law that we're dealing with, and that's being exploited right now and causing all these, terrible problems. I mean, to have 50,000 kids without parents dumped across the border, we can be tough and enforce laws on adults all we want. But when it's kids, it really changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah, you wonder
a lot.
what their parents are thinking. And a lot of them they have to go all the way across Mexico and maybe other countries to get there.
Yeah.
What are their parents thinking?
Well, they're
Just to
thinking
send
they
them
have
there.
no hope in their own country. I mean, I
know.
think that's what they're thinking, and that there's some chance that even if their kid is put across the border by himself or herself, that they might have a shot at a better life than what they have in hand.
So, I guess my question is, and I'm a Christian, obviously. I'm not going to turn a kid away at the border. We feed him, we clothe him, we take care of him. But where do we draw the line? I mean, we can't take care of, the old slippery slope fallacy. We can't take care of all the children in the world who need help.
No, it's a huge problem, and like I said, it's easy to figure out laws and rules for adults, right? That's easy. We can throw the book at them, put them on a bus, send them back, drop them off across the border. It's a whole different dynamic when you're dealing with kids,
Right.
and we just have to sort this thing out. And I don't think there's an easy answer. I don't think there's a good answer. It's a huge problem.
No, I agree. It does go back to securing the border, which we should have done a long time ago, and we still fail to do that. Whenever we talk about immigration reform, the first thing we should focus on is securing the border so people cannot get across it. It's a national security issue. If all these kids can cross our border this easily, who's to say somebody, a terrorist with a dirty bomb, can't do it just as easily? They can, very simply. So we have to secure the border. What to do with all the kids, that is a very tough question. And immigration is another political football, and the president is out there saying, well, if Congress refuses to act, I'm going to act on my own with an executive order, which he'll once again go above the Constitution that he swore to uphold and protect. He's done that repeatedly, done that with Obamacare by delaying parts of it. And it'll be interesting to see what he does this summer with immigration. I'm sure he will act in a way that goes against what Congress has decided to do.
Is this an overall failure of leadership of both parties to handle this problem?
Yes.
Yeah,
Should we just
absolutely.
not have the people in place that can do anything about
Yeah,
it?
well, Republicans say secure the border and then we can talk about reform. And they're right on that instance. But it's an issue that has played out for far too long. There's no easy solution to it, but our nation is so divided, especially in Washington, D.C., and nobody has any real solutions or a way to bring people together.
Well, that's not exactly true,
well-
Kevin. I mean, you've got the Senate has passed comprehensive immigration reform, and the president is for it. The group that doesn't agree are the House Republicans.
Because they say secure the border first.
But that can be included in, like, there has to be one agreement here. We're not going to do this in pieces.
That is the one sticking point Republicans have,
It's
though.
too
Secure
painful,
the border
like,
first.
But why not sit down at the table? Because you have guys like Steve King who said, no reform, no change, period. I'm not for anything. Like, that's his latest.
He's for securing the border.
No, his latest position is, I'm not for any change, period.
Okay, I haven't heard that, and I would be highly surprised if he said that. Steve King for years has advocated for securing the border, which is what we need to do first, and then we can talk about comprehensive immigration reform or whatever you want to do.
I think his calculation
with it.
is any change is going to be bad. I'm for nothing.
I disagree.
So-
Steve King believes in securing the border. I know for a fact that he does.
So are we looking at a lot of sticky topics that are going to come to the forefront right now, or are we just dealing with I'm a lawyer, I'm a farm girl, and let's see who wins battles?
You know, it's actually a good point that you bring up. I think the one issue that came up in June that Joni Ernst has sort of shifted her position. She's actually shifted it a lot. Before the primaries, she said on the question of the federal minimum wage that she thinks that the federal government doesn't have a role in this, that states have different economies, and that each state should set their own minimum wage. See, she didn't say it once. She didn't say it twice. She said it about 5 different times. I don't think the federal government has a role in this. And then just a week ago, she says to the U.S. News and World Report, I've never called for the abolishment of the federal minimum wage. Well, yeah, you did. She did it 5 times.
No, she didn't. She never said we should abolish the federal minimum wage. She did say it should be left up to the states, which is a federalist point of view.
So, okay,
it's the point of view of Thomas Jefferson, the founder of the Democratic Party. She did not call for abolishment of the federal minimum wage.
She didn't say the word abolish, but do you think she thinks that the federal government should set the minimum wage?
No, she doesn't.
Okay,
think that. She believes it should be left up to the states.
So if you look
that
up
is
the
a
definition,
Republican, a federalist point of view. That's a conservative point of view. That's the way our democracy and our republic was set up. We have a Republican
I'm
form
about
of
to agree
government.
with you. Let me agree with you.
Okay.
Okay, so if you don't think
That's
there
a
should be a
shocker.
federal minimum wage, that's abolishing it. It's
She's
currently
never called
in
for
place.
the abolishment of it.
Okay, what do you call it if something is currently in place and then you remove it?
She has not said remove it. She has just said the minimum wage should be left up
Use
to the
those
states.
words. Again.
Okay, but if, all right, I don't understand what you're saying. So there is currently a federal minimum wage. She is advocating that the federal government should not have a role in this, that there should be no federal minimum wage. You just agreed with me on that.
Correct.
So what is it called when you have one and then all of a sudden you don't have one?
Okay, but you're putting words in her mouth. You're
No, I'm
saying,
not. I'm
yes,
asking
you
a
are.
question.
And the Iowa Democratic Party put out a video saying the same thing. Joni Ernst called for the abolishment of the federal minimum wage. No,
Kevin,
she did not. She never said that.
Kevin,
she believes
that
it
was
should be
her
left up to
quote.
the states, which is the right point of view. That's the way our government was set up, to have a Republican representative form of government.
Kevin, the video used her quote where she
Yes,
said,
and
I
her
never
quote-
called for the abolishment of the federal
And
minimum
she
wage.
did not.
Why do we need either to do it? Why can't a business just decide what they're going to pay people
No, there's a novel idea.
and let it go at that? And
See,
let,
that's why
Sure,
we need
you
to
know.
elect Jeremy Parkin.
Of course.
Justin Harkin.
Justin Harkin.
I think
for
I'm
Senate.
somewhere in between too dumb and not dumb enough to run for office.
No. I mean,
No,
look,
you're plenty dumb enough.
We could, we could
Don't
do
sell
that,
yourself short.
and people could make $2 an hour, right? And-
Yeah, or they could go somewhere else. and
Or
not
they
make
could
it
go
up.
somewhere else. But you know what? What we've decided is that there does need to be a federal standard.
A living wage.
Well, it's not a living wage. The federal minimum wage is not a living wage. We think it should go to $10.10 an hour so that you're closer to that living wage. Because if you work full time, you shouldn't be below the poverty level. I mean,
You're
that's,
not, if you work full time making the minimum wage, you're not below the poverty level.
well. You also think to remove a law does not mean to abolish it. So I don't know.
She never said, let's remove the law. Again, you guys are putting words in her mouth. You're twisting what she's saying.
if she said there should be no federal minimum wage.
Right. She said she opposes the federal minimum wage.
No, she said, I do
it
not
should be
support-
left. It should be left up to the states.
She
She never used the word abolish. is
Well, the
what he's
good
saying.
news
Okay,
is
okay.
that kind of language and rhetoric is a breath of fresh air that we've never heard in Washington D.C. before. Holy cow, we need somebody like that.
There you go. All right. Well, good discussion, gentlemen.